What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Les Alex here with another gameplay video. This time, gonna be checking out Pioneer, the hottest new format in competitive Magic. Personally, I'm super stoked to be playing this format. No, I'm not playing Control. I'm gonna be checking out a deck that actually just rotated out of Standard, the Kethis Diligent Excavator combo. It's a really sweet deck. I'm really stoked. If you like the content, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Without further ado though, here we go. Alright, so before we get into the gameplay, I wanted to talk about the deck a little bit. This deck is very interesting, kind of like an egg style mixed with a storm style deck. So Kethis is the main card in the deck. Kethis, the hidden hand, basically acts like a Baral Chief of Compliance for legendary creatures, as well as a Past in Flames for legendary creatures in the graveyard. However, you just have to exile 2 legendaries in your graveyard. Basically, what you want to do in this deck is get Diligent Excavator in play, and Diligent Excavator is a 2-mana 1/3. Whenever you cast a historic spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into the graveyard. So that means a bunch of historics: 4 Mox Ambers, 4 Oath of Nissa, Hope of Girapur, 4 Fibblethip, 4 Jace Vryn's Prodigy, 1 Lazab, 4 Kethis, 4 Teferi, and 4 Emery Lurker. And of course, we're playing the 2 Tomb of Yawgmoths. So this deck has a bunch of legendary cards and historic cards. So almost everything of what we're going to cast in this deck is going to actually trigger Diligent Excavator. It's finding the Diligent Excavator. We can do that with, of course, Oath of Nissa, Once Upon a Time, drawing it naturally, of course. But basically, we want to get Diligent Excavator in play, start milling our graveyard, and start activating Kethis to get a situation where we have Mox Amber in play and Mox Amber in a graveyard and have enough legendary cards to constantly be looping them. Every single time we cast a historic spell, we're milling ourselves too until we find either a Lazav or a second Diligent Excavator to then start milling our opponent. And that's the win condition, really. That really is the win condition, is to mill our opponent out. I have won with attacking my opponent. It was terrible. It was like not a good game. Neither of us really did our things, but it is possible to win that way, but definitely not what you want to be doing in this deck. Of course, Emery definitely helps that. Turn 2 Emerys are excellent in this deck because then you can just rebuy your Mox Amber. You don't actually have to exile anything. And of course, Hope of Girapur is free with Kethis in play. And then Teferi Time Leveler really does just shut down opponents' game plans of like counter spells or any nonsense like that. It acts kind of as a main deck version of Veil of Summer, which is in the sideboard. But Teferi just deals with problem cards like Grafdigger's Cage, Rest in Peace. Rest in Peace is probably the best card against us, but, you know, the deck is very resilient, and much like decks that utilize a graveyard in Modern, this one does have some answers. So that's the main board. In the sideboard, and again, this format's wide open, so you can just pretty much play a vast array of sideboard cards, but I'm going with Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, ×2. It's a way that if we don't have access to the Kethis plan, or say they have Grafdigger's Cage in play, we can just mill ourselves out and not have to worry about actually casting the things in our graveyard, and it gives us an alternative way to win the game other than just bashing, which that is just, it's not a very realistic way to win the game. It happens sometimes, but not very realistic. Then we have Thoughtseize. Thoughtseize is just a great card. I think it's going to be one of the best cards in Pioneer, and just a really good tool to hate out the hate. And then this deck really does struggle against like very quick aggro decks. And seeing as we are milling ourselves, we're probably going to be putting a bunch of permanents in play, a bunch of creatures, a bunch of lands. So Pulse of Marasa is almost always going to have a target. So gaining 6 life is no joke. And then, of course, Veil of Summer. What can you say about this card? This card is great. It's basically a staple in any green deck, especially any green combo deck. Again, one thing I do want to point out is Teferi does kind of act as a Veil of Summer, but you can Veil of Summer them when they thought seize you before you have your Teferi down. So very, very versatile card. And a cantrip. It's a 1-mana Cryptic Command basically in this deck, which is just insane. Assassin's Trophy. I wanted to play Assassin's Trophy because you get into scenarios where they have Rest in Peace or they have Grafdigger's Cage or Damping Sphere, and you really do have to kill those. So Assassin's Trophy is great. And then Pithing Needle, really, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted, but Pithing Needle sounds great. And haven't brought it in too much, but against the heavy Planeswalker decks, I think it's great. Against Control, probably pretty good. Obviously not naming fetch lands in this format, but still, this sideboard for most of these decks are going to be in flux just because who knows what this format's really going to look like. We'll start to see the 5-0 lists here in the next coming days, but I'm really excited for this format. It's modern without Tron and Blood Moon. Sign me up. Anyway, let's get into these games. All right, so into game number 1. We did win the die roll, so that's fortunate. So taking a look at our opener, it was not very good. We have 4 lands, Diligent Excavator, Emery, and Teferi. I did mulligan this hand, and then our next hand was much better with a Once Upon a Time. Basically, what I'm learning with this deck is if you have Once Upon a Time and at least 1 land, you just keep it because Once Upon a Time, the card is insane. It's so good when it's your first spell of the game. So I do end up keeping this, putting back a Diligent Excavator. So first things first, of course, we start things off with Once Upon a Time. Double Fibblethip, Hallowed Fountain. Take Hallowed Fountain. White mana is very important in this deck. Obviously, you can't cast Kethis without white mana, and white mana is kind of scarce in the deck, so I did just keep the Hallowed Fountain. Played out Botanical Sanctum, and passed turn. So here, then, we played Jace Vryn's Prodigy out on turn 2. They played an island, of course, and we just passed back. Wanted to get Jace out to start looting early and often. It's always good to get him out and start churning through. They play a Witching Well, so the jig is up for them. We know that they're playing Paradoxical or something to that effect. They play out an Ornithopter and an Emery and just pass back. We draw a Breeding Pool, which isn't really excellent, but we do play Teferi Time Raveler here and just Time Walk them by bouncing their Emery, and we draw Lazav. Lazav is actually, like, really good in this deck, too. We loot with Jace and find a Lazav, discarding a Breeding Pool. So now we do have a lot of the combo pieces here already in our hand. All we really need to do is find a Mox Amber, and then we can kind of just go off here. Not to mention a black source. We do also have to find a black source, obviously, to be able to cast Kethis. So our opponent plays Reverse Engineer for the turn, and we are super excited about that. They don't even replay their Emery. So they draw some cards, which is fine, but from here I'm thinking we're in pretty good shape as long as we can find a black source. We play Diligent Excavator, play our Breeding Pool, play our Mox Amber, target ourselves with Diligent Excavator, fill up that graveyard as fast as possible. We do activate Jace Vryn's Prodigy, flip Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and down tick on Once Upon a Time, really needing to find that black source. So I grabbed Diligent Excavator here, which was a mistake. I could have drawn Mana Confluence off that. I honestly just missed it. So, just destroy me in the comment section, I guess. They play the Emery that we bounced. and then play a Terrarian tapped. We draw another Kethis. Play Diligent Excavator, uptick Jace, uptick Teferi. That's back. Our opponent cracks the Terrarian. Then activates Emery and plays Mox Amber. They Mox Amber, tap to cast Inspiring Sanctuary. And right here, I was starting to get a little bit worried because they could start going crazy now that they have Improvise to all of their non-artifact spells. But as it turns out, they just pass turn. We draw an Urborg, and I am extremely happy at this point because we have double Kethis in our hand. So even if they have like a counterspell or something, we can then next turn try and go for it again. So we got double Diligent Excavator triggers, and this is what I'm talking about with 2 Diligent Excavators in play. It's just insane. We target ourselves on both. We find a Mox Amber. Tap Mox Amber for a black. Exile a couple cards in our graveyard. Activate Kethis. Play Mox Amber. Diligent Excavator. Targeting ourselves and targeting ourselves. And filling up the yard with more and more legendaries. Mox Amber enters the battlefield. Of course, we're going to keep the new one. We tap the new one for blue mana. And we cast Oath of Nissa from the graveyard, thanks to Kethis. Diligent Excavator triggers both at us, getting another Mox Amber. So now we have access to all 4 Mox Ambers, and this game is all but over because now we can just start looping them. On Oath of Nissa, we find Blooming Marsh and Diligent Excavator. Another Diligent Excavator is just insane. We activate Kethis again. And Diligent Excavator comes down. We cast Fibblethip, which has 3 Diligent Excavator triggers, and then, of course, a Fibblethip trigger whenever it enters. And now we start targeting them and us. Fibblethip enters the battlefield. And at this point, I kind of knew that the game was over. I cast Mox Amber, Diligent Excavator trigger. And really just starting to mill them out. Mox Amber into the battlefield. We tap it. Cast another one. And then they finally do scoop it up for game number 1. So, yeah, I mean, deck's insane. All right, so after sideboarding, we were obviously on the draw. Take a look at our hand. It's pretty good. We've got double Kethis, which is kind of awkward, but we have Mox Amber, Emery, and Fibblethip. So Fibblethip's going to draw us a card. And hopefully we can find a Diligent Excavator. If we do, we have the combo in hand and ready to rock and roll. They start off with a Terrarian, which is fine. That's not the worst thing that could be done on turn 1 for them. We do find Diligent Excavator on our very first draw, so we're very excited about that. We just played Botanical Sanctum and passed the turn. They play Zephyrin Void, scry 1. And here I'm kind of worried about counterspells, but they end up main phase 2ing, cracking the Terrarian to draw a card. Very interesting. And then they play out an Ornithopter and an Emery. Pass back to us. We draw a Jace. Play Blooming Marsh. And then play Fibblethip because I wanted to draw a land here. We needed a white source. Kind of the same issue as last game, but for white instead of black. We instead draw Fibblethip, impasse turn. They play Statuary and activate Emery, bringing Ornithopter into play, and they just pass. So feeling pretty good. As long as we can find a white source, I'm feeling pretty good. We got the combo in hand. Cast Once Upon a Time here, because again, just really need to find this white mana source. I end up finding and playing this Hallowed Fountain. I play an untapped because now we can actually just cast Diligent Excavator and try and win the game next turn. Or at least set up to win the game. Maybe not win the game, but at least set up. And we've got double Kethis, so if they want to counter one, we can just retry the next turn. They activate Emery, play Witching Well, scry a couple, play land, and just pass turn. So that turn I was very much thinking we were going to start getting Aetherflux Reservoir, but that's not the case. We play Kethis, trigger Diligent Excavator. Of course, we target ourselves. Don't really find anything good. Just hit a Glacial Fortress and a Thoughtseize. Very underwhelming hit. But we have Emery to kind of shore up our draw here. After playing the Emery, I kind of think we should have probably played the Jace this turn. Just because the next turn we could play Emery and then activate Jace. So maybe the incorrect play. Maybe not, though. Because if we hit Mox Amber there, we start to just go nuts the next turn, so. End of the turn, they cast Paradoxical Outcome and bounce a bunch of cards to their hand. And so now I'm thinking we're pretty much dead. They play out the Witching Well. They play an Inventor's Fair and their Ornithopters again. Activate Emery. And Paradoxical Outcome again. And then they scoop it up. I'm assuming they just never found their Aetherflux Reservoir. And yeah, that was it. But yeah, that's it. That was the whole match. I really thought I was going to die. Like those last 2 turns of the game, I thought I was dead. But they just never drew the reservoir. And that's the problem with that Paradoxical Outcome deck in Pioneer, I think. There are a lot of issues with the Kethis deck, though. The mana's not great. You're playing a 4-color deck in a format that doesn't have fetch lands, really. And I don't think playing Fabled Passage is really where you want to be when you're trying to win on turn 4. All in all, I do dig the deck. It's very powerful, and I think it might be one of the best decks, but there's really no way to know until we gather some data about this deck and see what the metagame really looks like. It's kind of up in the air. It's a brewer's paradise. It really, really is. Overall, about Pioneer, I'm really, really excited to see where the format goes. And for everyone who's kind of negative about it, I'm not here for that. I'm not here for that. The format is excellent. The fact that only fetch lands are banned are excellent. I think it's awesome. Whenever Modern came around, I think it was a big mistake to ban as many cards as they did. Let the players play. Let the players break the format, and then we can fix it. And the fact that Wizards went out and said, hey, we're going to be pretty aggressive with these bannings, I think only adds to the fact we can't be salty if we're playing these very powerful decks and they get banned. So it's on us. It really is on us. But all in all, the deck is great. I'm very excited to play it. I'm building it in paper as well. Jace Vryn's Prodigies are like $50 now. That's not great, but it's an awesome deck. If you're trying to get into Pioneer and you like playing combo decks, if you like playing Storm style decks or Egg style decks, it's definitely a great starting point. I definitely recommend this deck. If you dig the video, make sure to hit that like and that subscribe button, as well as go over to Twitter and give me a follow there. I post about Magic every single day, and we can chop it up, talk about some decks, talk about Pioneer or Modern. I'm game on both fronts. But yeah, everyone, thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you around.